It's the Use Your Head podcast. Good to be with you again. I'm John McLean. Welcome to the show where we use our heads against the forces that would have us engage in groupthink. We're going to talk about groupthink today on this episode. This happens to be numero ocho, episode 8 of season 3. That's about all the Spanish I know, by the way. It's good to have you with us for the Use Your Head podcast, wherever you are. I'm seeing folks listening in from all around the world, which is such an encouragement. Thank you so much for being along here for this short time that we spend together. It's usually about a half hour or so. I don't know, just whatever we decide to wrap it up. And I try not to get wordy, but sometimes I do. So I ask your forbearance. But I try to stay organized. And today, it's been a few weeks since we've been together. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way, here in the United States. Thanksgiving is the one of the last Thursdays of November, which is just a few weeks away. And so I know our friends up north in Canada celebrate Thanksgiving in October. It really doesn't matter when, as long as you do it. I think I've often said that gratitude is sorely lacking in our world today, and it's one of the most critical things that we can do in our culture. So happy Thanksgiving to you. So often, I wasn't going to get on this soapbox, but I guess I will a little bit. It drives me nuts when Christmas decorations start going up in early October, along with the Halloween deck. Thanksgiving just gets bowled over every year. It's kind of like, gratitude, that's an old concept. Who needs that? Let's go spend money. Let's go buy stuff. Happy Thanksgiving. I love you. Thanks for joining in. My name is John McLean, coming to you from Dallas, Texas, or near there. I'm a postulant for holy orders. I'm studying for the diaconate in the Reformed Episcopal Church. Everything's going great in seminary. Thanks for asking. And really, really enjoying my time and happy to be with you on this podcast. Everybody wants to tell you what to think. Every time there's a news story, every time there's a situation, an incident, an anniversary of something, there's all these people that think they're smarter than you and want to tell you what to think. This show rejects that. No, we have our own ability to think for ourselves. And so we do that today. I want to talk about groupthink today, because we had an election yesterday. By the way, today as we record this is Wednesday, November 5th. Happy birthday, Dad. There are lots of stuff. And the big thing that's dominating the headlines, like it always does, is New York City. New York City always dominates the headlines. Every time anything happens there, we see it nationwide. And New York City has elected a socialist as their mayor. An outspoken, self-proclaimed socialist for their mayor. He's also an outspoken and self-proclaimed Muslim socialist. Zohran Mamdani will become the new mayor of New York City, which is often called America's mayor. I staunchly object to that. I will never call a socialist my mayor. I want to first address this just dripping irony that a socialist was elected. So a socialist is celebrating being elected, which is a democratic idea. All right. Elections don't happen in socialism. All right. Socialism is run by dictatorships, brutality, often military in nature. This gentleman, and I'm calling him a gentleman. Don't know the guy personally. Maybe a nice guy, but he has some really dangerous and terrible and yes, evil ideas. And now he's going to be running the largest city in America, a city, by the way, which kind of represents the United States worldwide, right? As New York goes, the United States goes, typically. I saw a cartoon today on social media of the Statue of Liberty trudging away, with one of those hobo packs over her shoulder, basically saying, that's it, I'm out. How can we have the Statue of Liberty standing in the harbor of a city that just elected a Muslim socialist as their mayor? And so the question, often comes up, well, how does this happen? How do people in any city, all right, L.A., Dallas, Omaha, Bismarck, North Dakota, Cincinnati, any city, how do Americans elect a socialist, a Muslim socialist? How does that happen? It goes far beyond the promise of free stuff, because that's how people get sucked into socialism. Free stuff? Well, who wouldn't want that? There is no such thing as free stuff. Someone is paying for it. Stuff doesn't fall out of the sky. Someone's producing it, someone's creating it, and someone's paying for it. And just because that someone isn't you doesn't mean it's free. And yet we have quote unquote educated people running around believing that that actually is true. So they've elected a socialist, and part of his platform was free stuff, right? He was talking about, yeah, we're going to have grocery stores, and it's a city where you can just come in and take stuff because food should be free. That'll be interesting. In any event, the first point I wanted to make is that a democratic socialist celebrating being elected is a tremendous irony. Okay. How does this happen? Well, it happens through something called groupthink. And groupthink becomes Groupvote. I read an article in Touchstone magazine that talked about this very thing. I'm not going to quote the article, so I'm not going to cite it or anything, but it got me thinking about this idea of groupthink. And it took us back to the historical Soviet experience that happened when the Bolshevik Revolution happened. Some of the greatest novelists and writers in history are Russian. I mean, they just are. And, Dostoevsky, Solzhenitsyn, Tolstoy, great writers who lived through this stuff. The nightmare of socialism and how it spreads. And often their conclusion is that it spreads through a party system where people think they believe something, but they really don't. It's the concept of being in a rock and roll stadium among 50,000 screaming, cheering fans who are essentially worshiping an idol on stage. It's very hard to swim against that stream. It's very hard to say, let's say, for example, your friends drag you to a concert of a band you really don't follow. But yeah, I'll go if it's a good time, and I like live music. And you discover that you really can't stand. You find no redeeming value at all in what's being presented, and yet you're surrounded by 50,000 screaming people that disagree with you. It's very hard not to stand up and cheer with them. I mean, what's the harm, right? Groupthink. And so many of these Russian novelists would write novels, and I'll be honest, I haven't read a lot of these books. I just know of them, and frankly, I'm a bit convicted. I should read them because there are a lot of lessons to be learned within those. One of those being that groupthink can become group vote. That's how these people rise to power. They're never honest about their platform, ever. Deception is how they get elected. There are not going to be free grocery stores in New York City. And if you're a New Yorker and you voted for Mamdani based upon that promise, you're going to be disappointed. You know why? Because people don't give away groceries. Somebody grew it. Somebody produced it. And in our food supply today, may have created it in a laboratory. But they don't give it away. It's not free. But through things like food stamps, where people are accustomed to getting food they didn't pay for. And yes, I'm going to gracefully say there are some in our country that need that kind of support and help, and I'm not against that. I'm against abusing it, but I'm not against taking care of the poor. If it's legit, and it often is. And yet, we have people going, free groceries, that sounds good. Things are just too expensive. We've talked about that in past episodes. How things are just too expensive now. The young generations feel like they're the only ones that have faced rising prices. And in fact, the opposite is true. Everyone has faced rising prices since prices were a thing. In other words, forever. But, everyone's perception is that they experience something for the first time, so they assume it's the first time it's ever happened, so here we are. Well, this is the first time it's ever happened in New York that we have a Muslim socialist that's going to be running New York City. This is a very, very dangerous thing. And look, I've seen the guy. I will give him his props. He's a great speech maker. He's charismatic. He's handsome. He says all the right things. He's got a great smile. Pretty killer beard. I mean, he says all the right things. Okay. And in fairness, it doesn't hurt him that we have a very polarizing president in the White House. And look, you can be pro-Trump, you can be anti-Trump, you can be sometimes Trump, you can be never Trump. You can think, what you want of the president, but he's there. And he's running what some might consider kind of a scorched earth, very different from his first term. He's being less careful, it seems, by implementing his agenda. And look, he's spending political capital that is his to spend. Fine. But what that can tend to do is get people that don't like him to panic. Because remember, people were saying he was going to round up gay people and put them in death camps, and he was going to starve children. None of that is happening. But it doesn't matter because that's happening in the minds of people. They talk about this, what is it, Trump derangement syndrome, DTS or some, whatever. That's where we are politically right now. But this groupthink happens when someone becomes so popular for whatever reason that you start to think that you agree and believe in something that maybe you don't. And so that's a potential answer for how could this guy get elected mayor of New York. All right. I'm not a New Yorker. Thank the Lord. And I will tell you that New York is now on my no-fly list. It's too dangerous. It's too dangerous. We have a guy that wants to open up jails and prisons. He wants to close Rikers Island. He wants to do all these types of things that is going to make an already high crime and dangerous place much, much worse. He's anti-police. He's pro-open borders, of course. All in the name of being pro-immigration and pro-equality and all this, and it's all nonsense. All right. I wanted to say something else. We've talked about socialism before. It's Animal Farm. If you haven't read Animal Farm, you really don't need to because it's happening right now. This is animalistic behavior. I got to thinking about this whole idea of groupthink and group believe. Here's what makes it dangerous. Imagine a pack of hungry wolves out in the wild, Yellowstone Park, for example. And it's cold and they're hungry. And say there's a pack of, 8 of them. I don't know how big packs are. Let's say 8. 8 wolves, hungry. And they're out looking for, let's say, a elk. They want to kill an elk. Elk are delicious. And there's enough for everyone. So they're going to go kill an elk. They find an elk and they're going to hunt together. They're going to work together to stalk the elk. And then they're going to spread out and probably triangulate and trap the elk. Get him alone. And then work him into a spot where he's vulnerable, where he can't escape. And then they're going to go in for the kill. And 8 of them are going to pounce from all 8 directions, and they're going to kill the elk. And he becomes their dinner. But what happens in this in-sync, cooperative, familial pack of hungry wolves if 2 of them go for the same quarter of meat? What's going to happen? They're now going to become mortal enemies and will kill one another over that quarter of meat. Because the need to cooperate is over. It's gone. In other words, there's nothing to it except for selfish gain. There's no commonality. Now, I'm not saying this is wrong, but what it is animalistic behavior. We've talked about this before on the show. When we remove the Christian ethic, the Judeo-Christian ethic upon which our republic was founded, and really much of the civilized West was founded. When you pull that out of society because, we don't need that anymore. In fact, it's phobic, blank phobic, fill in the blank. We become animals. We become that hungry pack of wolves. We'll work together to get what we want, but as soon as we get it, you better get out of my way because we'll eat our own. That's what animals do. Humans are called to something higher than that. But in the case of socialism, where what was one of the first things that Karl Marx said in his manifesto, God must be dead, Religion cannot exist with socialism because the ethic has to be gone for socialism to, quote, work. And so what we're seeing now on the left in this country, and it was amazing, it was happening at the party. I saw a clip at the victory party for Zoran Mamdani. And of course, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, known as AOC, was there because she's a New York congresswoman. Her district is there. She's at the party, partying up. And what are they doing? They're putting leading Democrats in Washington on notice that your time is done. Chuck Schumer was mentioned by name. He's been the Democrat leader in the Senate forever, for a long time. But now that they got what they want, guess what? They're eating their own. And I just posed, and look, even if you agree with their platform, you may be pro-gay and you may be pro-open borders and you may be pro-free grocery stores or whatever. Even if you agree with all that, I have a question for you. Is that the kind of culture you want to live in? Well, yeah, we'll work together till we get what we want, but then you better get out of my way, pal. Because the love stops there, because it's only self-love. And as much as socialism talks about, it's about loving everyone and making sure everyone has everything they need, that is a lie. Because throughout history, there's an estimated 100 million dead people that if they could speak, would say, it didn't work out that way. I was hoping it would, but they murdered me. And it happens because of groupthink. And cultures that are in trouble are vulnerable to it. Hitler rose to power in Germany because after World War I, the country was flattened and the people were starving. Hitler promised them food, and he promised that Germany would rise to be proud again. Well, what hungry German wouldn't be attracted to that message? Especially by a guy that stands up there and speaks with passion, which Hitler did. How'd that work out? Not only were Jews, German Jews, along with a lot of other Jews, exterminated for being the wrong flavor, but Germany was flattened again. The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. Now we've got to take out the Tsar, and now we have Lenin coming in. How did that work out? Here's Russia, troubled. Winters there are brutal. People are hungry. The economy's a wreck. Well, Stalin comes in to follow Lenin, and millions of people are murdered. It doesn't work. And if you're a socialist utopist, and college campuses today are loaded with them. Oh, he wants utopia. It's Eden. Who doesn't want Eden? My friend, the scriptures, the Holy Bible, the book that you reject, tells us that there will be Eden again, but not the way you think. Man is fallen and therefore unable to create it. We got thrown out of it, in fact. Cast out. Right away. In the first few pages. So we can't create Eden in socialism. All we can do is the next best thing, which is capitalism. Capitalism has generated more wealth and more freedom for more people in more places in world history. Is it perfect? Absolutely and unequivocally not. It has flaws, and it's subject to abuse. And when you get bad actors in positions of power, New York, then things are going to go bad. So I'm deeply grieved for New Yorkers. Look, there were numbers of, people doing because this guy has been leading this mayoral race for a long time. It was a foregone conclusion. He was already starting to govern before the election, already starting to put his group together. He was going to win. He was so far ahead and did win. It wasn't close. So much so that there were surveys going out around the city saying, hey, listen, if this guy wins, are you sticking around? And hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers claimed if he wins, we're going to flee the city. We're leaving. And that's all well and good. Look, people have done that. People are fleeing California by the thousands, still are. Believe me, I live in North Texas. I know. But my thoughts turn to the New Yorkers that can't leave. The ones that are stuck there. Because moving's expensive. And frankly, if you have a job in New York where you're just getting by, you can't just up and leave, become a hobo. If you have a family, that doesn't make any sense. So you're stuck there. You're stuck there with a potentially very dangerous situation. I want to talk about one more thing before I let you go here on the Use Your Head podcast. I was thinking about Islam. I know a lot about it, mainly from my audiobook work and the histories that I've read. And look, before you say, well, yeah, of course you've read histories because they're all written by Christians. Not all of them. All right. You're going to have to take for granted the fact that I can be objective. If you don't agree with that, you probably shouldn't be listening to me. But in any event, yes, I am a Christian and I think I'm right, but I still am interested in history. So I've read a lot about Islam. And I've compared that to what the media would have me believe and what a lot of my teachers, even as far back as high school, tried to get me to believe. That Islam is just different. And Allah is just another name for God. That's just the Muslim name for God. It's the same God. That's what they told me. Fortunately, I knew better and looked it up and realized that's a lie. Here's what I know about Islam. And if you'll look, you'll find this in their holy book. Killing is a means to an end. Always has been. That's why the Crusades happened. Because the followers of Muhammad wanted to conquer the world. That's what their God told them to do. Their prophet told them to do. And he said, if you have to kill, then you kill. It's okay. It's a means to an end. So people were butchered. Women are property at the mercy of cruel men. Rape, just fine. Just fine. If you're a woman in Islam, you better toe the line. And even them, sometimes it won't save your life. Deception is just fine if it gets you what you want. That's in there too. It's a philosophy of aggression rather than defense. And as I was reflecting on this, it got me thinking. Killing is a means to an end. Women are property at the mercy of men. Deception is just fine if it gets you what you want. Aggression, not defense. That sounds a heck of a lot like socialism, doesn't it? What did Lenin want to do? Take over the world. Conquer everything. He was maddened by power. Ditto Adolf Hitler, the Democratic Socialist, which was the name of his party. Socialist. These socialist dictators in South America, right? There's one in Venezuela, one in Colombia now. By the way, they're partying big time over this election. They think this is a big, big deal. Especially the guy down in Colombia. I don't remember his name. It doesn't matter. He thinks he's like, way to go, New York. Well done. Meanwhile, his country's a mess and his people are starving and living at the hands of cartel violence. I'm shocked at how much how much Islam parallels Karl Marx. And Karl Marx was not a socialist. Was not a Muslim, rather. That was kind of a Freudian slip. It's kind of the same thing. It's a culture of death. Is what it is. And in contrast to Christianity, which is a culture of life. In Christianity, in our book, we're taught that killing is wrong unless you're defending yourself. But killing is never a means to an end. Women are never property in the Christian faith. They're to be protected, revered, and yes, we're called as men to die for our women, if need be, to cherish them. Deception is not just fine in Christianity. We're not supposed to deceive. We're not supposed to bear false witness. It's not okay. And aggression, no, we're to defend ourselves. But we don't hold guns or knives to people's throats and say, proclaim Christ or die. And so, you choose. This is America. New Yorkers have chosen. Now, I'm not saying that this guy is going to, open up, Sharia law or whatever across the city, although that's not outside the realm of possibility now. Look what happened in London, by the way. They elected a Muslim guy to be their mayor. And of course, Great Britain in many ways has a lot of socialist bents that we don't have here. They have, medicine and things like that. Very progressive. But they have people getting stabbed left and right. They have the police have been defanged and told to lay off. They have whole neighborhoods that have been taken over and basically are living under Sharia law because of this Mayor Khan that they had. You may think I'm being racist or what is it, Islamophobic? Well, yeah, I'll admit I'm kind of afraid of this religion because I've read about it and I've seen the blood trail as a result. 25 years ago, when the Twin Towers fell, New Yorkers were putting up signs saying, "Never forget," bumper stickers. "We will never forget 9/11. FDNY, NYPD, never forget." Remember Rudy Giuliani? Remember the days he went without sleep and the funerals that he did, his haggard look as he tried to work his way through the nightmare in the aftermath of that day. And yet 25 years later, we have a socialist Muslim who, by the way, is pro-Palestinian, very anti-Israel, has nothing bad to say about Hamas, is now the mayor of New York City. And so, as I often do, look, none of us can do anything about this except to pray. Only God can fix this, and God will in the fullness of time. But it's something we need to be very careful about. Because one thing the media is saying that is true is as New York goes, the rest of America, typically to varying degrees, will follow. That just kind of happens. It's kind of a strange thing. New York's kind of out there on the edge of the country, the Northeast. It's kind of sitting on this weird looking island and yet culturally and in terms of the arts and, in terms of journalism and many, many other things, it kind of spreads out. And New York is a melting pot. And that's another reason why, we need to be on our guard because for too long, Americans said that could never happen here. That could never happen here. And then 9/11 happened here. And people began to go, oh, maybe it can happen here. And then we said, well, no, not now for sure, because we've seen what happens. Never again. We'll never forget. And here we are. Pray for New Yorkers who feel trapped. I can't imagine the fear that they have. I pray that, and look, my first prayer is that this guy, Mamdani, is just blowing smoke. And then he's just going to be your typical New York liberal mayor. The city will survive that. They've survived many of them. Not that it's good, but it's not the kind of stuff that is possible here. So anyway, we'll see what happens. A lot of people are saying that this is functionally the end of the Democratic Party as we know it. I don't know that I would agree with that. We'll see what happens. There's definitely turmoil there within. And I try not to be political on this podcast because that's not really what I am. I try to talk about the world in terms of ministry, both from an eschatology standpoint and also just from an observation of how we can be salt and light in the world, which is what our Lord called us to be. And so as we do that, we look around at our brothers and sisters who may be in danger, and we pray for them. We have compassion for them. And we pray for our leaders, including this Mamdani. I pray that he would see the light of truth in his life, that he would repent, he would convert, and that he would love his neighbor with true love, not deception and lies. This is the Use Your Head podcast. I'm John McLean. I love you. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.